Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ultimate Nostalgia Man channel. And today I have a really great fun collab for you guys. I'm here with my good friend Goosebumps Completionist. So how are you
Hi,
doing?
everybody. Doing great. I'm excited to talk about what we're talking about today because um, a lot of these movies I really love, and if you follow my other channel that I don't really post on anymore, but there's a channel out there I have called Austin in the Middle where I talk about similar stuff like this. I do plan on in the future covering a lot of these movies that we're going to be talking about in this collab today on that channel at some point.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you on as always, man.
Yeah.
So for the topic today, we are going to be talking about our top 10 favorite Disney movies. Because obviously this whole channel is focused on nostalgic properties, things we all watched growing up, just cartoons, live action, whatever you want to do. So I felt like this is a fun collab idea, just to for especially for a completionist to branch out of his little kid's horror bubble he usually is in. So
I know that bubble. Yeah, I'm always in the horror bubble most of the time. But I try. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I don't only consume horror. I also have a huge other life outside of it. Like I'm big into like reality game shows, and I'm big into nostalgia just in general and stuff I watched when I was a kid. And I still keep up with all the mainstream superhero stuff. I read comics. I watch all the movies that come out. I watch dramas, musicals, a little bit of everything. I'm just not as passionate to talk about it on a regular basis as I am horror, but I do consume it, if that makes sense.
yeah, for sure. So I would say we just kind of get right into it, and I'll let you start since you're the guest. What would be your number 10 favorite Disney movie?
Okay, so I know we talked about this before we got on. I kind of cheated here, but I included franchises when I could. My number 10 is actually the National Treasure movies with Nicolas Cage. And
Hmm.
here's the thing. I went to university. I was a history major. I double majored in history, historiography even. I'm a big history guy. I love conspiracies. I love. I'm just fascinated by that. And like, I used at one point in my life literally consume YouTube media that was revolved around conspiracy theories, and I had an entire playlist of my favorite videos that content creators would make. National Treasure kind of itches that scratch on a popular conspiracy that I'm well versed into, and that is the founding fathers slash the all-seeing eye or the Illuminati conspiracy that founded America, and there's some secret society keeping the secrets from the American public for the greater good. And some of these legends have spawned into other things, like another show I'm into, like The Curse of Oak Island, which kind of echoes a similar sentiment to these movies, where there's legends associated with the Knights Templar and keeping priceless relics from history hidden away from the rest of humanity because there's going to be countless wars fighting over this stuff, and there has to be a place where all this stuff ended up. National Treasure is literally a fictionalized idea of somebody finding this stuff, like these priceless artifacts. And they did it for two movies, and I'm shocked they never did a third one. But I'm also not surprised given, some behind the scenes stuff I heard going on with Nicolas Cage and Jerry Bruckheimer and all of them. But these two movies to me are just fun, family friendly action. There's nothing too hardcore going on here. And there's a riveting plot, especially in the first movie when you meet these characters. Um, I want to say his name is Benjamin Gates. I think that's the main character. And meeting him, he's so larger than life. He knows everything. He's like the Neil deGrasse Tyson of historians. He just is a walking encyclopedia of everything history. And I don't know. There's something about it. As that first movie progresses, you learn bits of uh, important information that add on, and the stakes get higher as his adversary is trying to also get what he's after. And I don't know, the mood of the movie and how it's shot and how the sequences unfold and where it takes you in the story has always captivated me. And the second movie I think is underrated. People don't give the second movie enough credit, but they had Ed Harris come in. He played in one of my favorite movies of all time called The Abyss. and I've loved everything he's ever been in. Basically, I mean, he was in one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie ever, Creep Show. He was in the Father's Day segment in that movie. Fantastic actor. He plays the villain of the second movie, and almost similarly, they're building on a new uh, conspiracy that's associated in American folklore. That's also tied to the Gates family in some capacity. And like I said, these movies are just, you can put them on at any time of the year, have fun with them, and that's what I try to find with these Disney movies most of the time. Not gonna lie, a lot of the I would say pre 2014 era of Disney is pretty much rewatchable to me in some capacity. But these two movies capture me, and that's why I put it on here. Um, so yeah, that's my number 10.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't seen the National Treasure movies in quite a while, but I remember watching them a lot when I was younger. My dad is a big history buff and stuff, so him, and even my mom are both kind of big history, more so my dad, but they both introduced me to those movies. And so they were really fun watches. And back, I think in like, I think eighth grade, the summer between eighth grade and my freshman year of high school, I actually went to Washington, D.C. with like my school. We did like a summer trip that you could apply for, and we actually visited some of the like the areas that they were filming in for the National Treasure movies, like the House of the Declaration of Independence that he goes to when he tries to steal that, and there's a few
Mhm.
other things like that. So it was kind of cool to walk around in those actual places from the movies. So that's kind of my more memories with it because I haven't seen them in a while, but yeah, I have some of those memories with it.
Yeah, man, you should give them a rewatch. They really do hold up. They really do.
Mhm. All right, so my number 10 is Hercules.
Okay.
This is one of those classic Disney Renaissance movies. You'll probably notice on my list, I have a lot of Disney Renaissance movies in here because that is like my favorite era of like Disney animation. And Hercules is one of those movies that I adored growing up. I watched it so many times, like mainly when I was like homesick or something like that. It was always kind of my go-to movie. And I don't know, there's just something really fun about it. The Greek mythology ties are always great because Greek mythology is just a very interesting, you know, I don't know if really we want to say religious beliefs, but just all these ideas of different gods and goddesses and things that the Greeks have invented. And it's just really interesting to look into all that stuff. And the way they do it in Hercules is just very fun, having it where Hades hears about the fact that Hercules is going to eventually overthrow him. So he tries to turn Hercules mortal and send him to Earth to try and stop this from happening. And of course, his bumbling two sidekicks, Pain and Panic, screw it up and don't give him the entire potion. So Hercules still retains some of that godlike strength that he has. And it's this whole hero's journey where he's going to try and find his destiny and things. It's a great movie, lots of fun. You got, Meg, who's like one of the best like female Disney characters, just this very unique way of doing a female Disney character because she's not your typical, dainty princessy kind of character. She still kind of has that damsel in distress role, but she also is very strong and just very spunky and just has a fun personality to her. Of course, you got Danny DeVito as Phil, the satyr, who is Hercules' mentor, who is just always great. Danny DeVito, you gotta love him, whatever he does. And then, of course, James Woods as Hades. We're not going to talk about James Woods, but we'll talk about Hades because he is a great character. And he's just one of the most entertaining and like energetic Disney villains, in my opinion. Just like the way he like pretty much just flips out at like the tiniest little like aggravating or bad news. And just again, the kind of game show host personality and stuff he has to him. It's just a very fun movie with some great music. A very interesting choice having Southern gospel be the main kind of musical choice for a Greek mythology movie, but it works shockingly well. And it just kind of ties the whole movie together in this very interesting way that it's just really fun and works for me.
Yeah, going on back to my history love, when I was in college, I studied a lot about Hellenistic culture. I studied, Greeks, the Alexandrian era with the Macedonians, and I took a deep dive in the mythologies of ancient Greek religion. And I think that Hercules is honestly one of the most impressive movies that Disney has made in terms of adapting, something that has been in mythology for, millennia now. And they really did their homework, and they tried to honor the mythos of Hercules and the myth of Hercules itself, who is, half human, half god, born from the son of Zeus, and how they built their own original story along the actual myth of Hercules. It has a lot of similarities where, Hercules, with the whole rock scene that you see in the animated movie, that was featured in the myth, and they follow along that pretty well. Um, to my knowledge from memory, I don't really remember Hades being involved, but I think he is instrumental in parts of it. Maybe not to the degree the movie is, but like I said, they took their own creativity here, and I have to say, Hercules has one of the better soundtracks for animated movies. I take a lot of that into account, especially with the animated movies. Like the voice acting usually, especially in the Renaissance era, is great across all the films. So what really sticks out to me is the music and how they're able to paint a canvas with the musical scenes that are common with these movies. But I think you picked a great pick for your number 10. I'm kind of upset with myself I didn't put more animated movies on my list. As a matter of fact, when we get to my number 9, I'm gonna do an audible, and I'm gonna change it to an animated movie that I think is criminally overlooked.
All right, it's cool. So we'll might as well get to that now. What is your number 9?
Okay, I originally was gonna put a live action movie, but I have plenty on here. I don't even need to mention it. My actual number 9 is a straight to video movie that I watched a ton as a kid, and I think it's honestly one of the greatest animated anthology movies ever made. I don't think it is the greatest because I think the greatest one is actually a couple spots higher on my list, Disney made. But my number 9 is Mickey's Once Upon a Christmas. The first one, not Twice Upon a Christmas, not that movie. First one. I love this movie to pieces. When you have the Donald Duck in the Huey, Dewey, and Louie story with, living Groundhog Day, or you have Goofy trying to get Max, the snowboard or whatever he wants for Christmas the most. And then you have Mickey and Minnie with, the watch, and the other thing I forgot what Mickey was trying to get, or Minnie was trying to get Mickey. But that's beyond the point. These stories are touching, and it's like a must holiday watch. It's like when you think about Disney holiday movies, name one holiday movie that sticks out for just being Christmas that is a must watch every year. Name one.
Yeah, I
There's
don't know.
not many. There's not many.
Mm-hmm.
This movie satisfies that for me. And I think it's greatly animated. And I love the fact that we have the Disney originals of Goofy, Donald, and Mickey leading the charge in this anthology movie. And it's narrated beautifully. It's animated quite well for it being a straight to video film. And it just has so much heart. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to not appreciate this movie. If you haven't seen it in a while, Micah, watch it this coming up year for the holiday season. I watched it this past year and it held up really well. And I have a soft spot for it. So that's why
Yeah,
it's my
that's one
number.
I'll have to check. Yeah, that's one I'll have to check out because I don't think I've ever actually seen that one. So I'm
You
kind of shocked
haven't?
I've never heard
Oh
of it.
wow. Oh wow.
Yeah.
You
I've
should
never,
check it
to
out.
be fair, I haven't really heard of a lot of like the actual Mickey and Friends related animated movies. I mainly just know like a lot of the more mainstream ones that we all kind of know. So I'll have to check that one out at some point.
To be fair, my Mickey exposure when I was a kid was not a lot. I think that was probably the first thing that was Mickey Mouse that I had owned in my physical collection as a child. So let's just say, yeah, I really love this movie. I love it near and dear. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny though when you think about the fact that Mickey and all of them are like the Disney mascots, yet don't have a lot of movies, or at least not a lot of memorable movies.
Yeah. All right.
Like, all right, so my number 9 probably gonna be a hot take because I feel like most people would not put this in their top 10 or even consider it in like their top 50 because this movie's gotten a lot of unfair hate ever since it released in the summer of 2023, and I don't understand this hate. I adore this movie, and that is Haunted Mansion. Now, if you guys don't know this about me, if you haven't seen, I know a Completionist and I did a collab reviewing this movie on my Goosebumps channel. So if you want to check that out, then you can see our full thoughts there. but I am a diehard fan of the ride in Disneyland, Disney World, wherever you go in a Disney park that has Haunted Mansion. It's my favorite thing ever. I am a huge Haunted Mansion nerd. I mean, I literally have a painting of it right in my background there. But what I love about this movie is just the love and care that everyone behind it put into it to include just a lot of great fan service that just really makes it feel like they wanted to pay respect to the ride, which is something that the Eddie Murphy movie tried doing, but kind of just failed at it, in my opinion, because the references were barely in there. And when they were very obscure or just very blink and you'll miss it kind of things. Like most things you get in the Eddie Murphy movie is the breathing door, the changing portraits, and then all the ghosts in the graveyard. Versus this one, like the mansion itself is a clone of the Disneyland mansion. They have all the different ghosts from the ride come in, the Hatbox Ghost being the main villain in this movie. You just got all of the iconic ghosts that you from the ride that you want to see in bigger roles in this movie. You got a great cast here with especially what's his name, Lakeith Stanfield playing Ben. I think he has a phenomenal performance in this movie. Like he just sells this emotional grieving person really well, and he just again there's a lot of great moments with him. I think the whole cast is very fun and just bounces off of each other very well. You got Owen Wilson, Danny DeVito, and you just got all these characters who just they play these characters with a very fun energy that just really works for the sake of the movie. And again, a lot of great fan service, just little things here and there, just details of like the doors being replicas of a door from the ride, the ballroom scene, like you get a whole shot near the end where you see like the perspective from the balcony looking out into the ballroom like you do on the ride. You got Jamie Lee Curtis playing Madame Leota, who is just a great addition to this movie. You just got so many things that you can just really tell everyone who made it was passionate about making a movie that felt like the ride and would please diehard fans. And so that's just why I love this movie so much. And it's just will always have a special place in my heart.
How you feel about that ride is how I feel about Tower of Terror in Hollywood Studios. And I heard recently they're trying to remake that movie. I forget who's supposed to be involved with it, but I have my ears perked because their first attempt, it was it was written by the Are You Afraid of the Dark creator and directed by him, and yeah, a lot to be desired. But yeah, I can understand why this movie's on your list. I know you're a big Haunted Mansion ride fan, and I have to say it is leaps and bounds better than the Eddie Murphy movie. I don't care what people say. You can
Mm-hmm.
predicate nostalgia and love Eddie Murphy and think he can't do no wrong, whatever. But you can't watch this movie and say that it isn't objectively better. I even love that there's Haunted Mansion comics. I think years ago, SLG made a series that was quite scary and dark, and then Disney, like semi recently, back I think it was back in 2016, maybe 2017, maybe 2018. They did a line with Marvel Comics called Disney Kingdoms, where they made a comic series based on the rides. And the Disney Kingdoms Haunted Mansion comic, low key, is a banger. Like nobody knows about it, but it's a great story. And if they want to make a new Haunted Mansion movie just to continue on and make anthological stories involving the ride, they should adapt that comic because that was emotional and it got into some characters that we got to see in the Haunted Mansion 2023 movie, but I think they use them in a more scarier light here. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be cool to see maybe a more horror take than like a ride homage take. Which I'm not complaining that what we got with 2023, but I kind of want to see them go into a more story centric thing with it and try to elevate it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think that I haven't owned the comics, but I've read a bit of them and I really want to try and get my hands on those because those look really cool and just a lot of interesting stuff they do with it. And
Yeah.
like the one thing I will say, it is a shame that we never got to see the Guillermo del Toro Haunted Mansion movie. That was like talked about back in like 2010. That was just stuck in development hell for so long.
Guillermo del
Because like
Toro is the people's fan that you want behind your movie. I think at one point he was trying to get Tales from the Crypt off the ground. He was like in a bidding war with M. Night Shyamalan at one point. He was trying to, he championed for scary stories to tell in the dark for years, and finally got that movie out. The only thing with Del Toro is most studios back out of his projects because he takes so long to do them. They're
Mhm.
like, if we're banking on you, it's going to take a while. But I mean, most of his stuff that I've seen, I've never really seen anything bad from Del Toro.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I mean, from what I've heard as well, like Crimson Peak is almost like his pseudo haunted mansion movie. Like apparently, a lot of the stuff that happened in Crimson Peak were in Toro's early scripts for the haunted mansion movies. So if you want to
I
see Del
never knew
Toro's
that.
haunted mansion, I guess watch Crimson Peak.
You know, I haven't watched it, but now that you mention it, from the trailers, I can see that because I did watch the trailers of it, and I'm
Mhm.
gonna probably check that out then because I want to see what that possibly could have been like.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to your number 8 now.
All right, my number 8 is another animated movie. This one is more near and dear to my heart because, like I said, when I think about animated movies, especially from the Renaissance era, I think this by far is my favorite one. And this might be a hot take, I don't know, but it's Tarzan. Tarzan, adapting Edgar Rice Burroughs' iconic character. And I think Disney made one great movie with this. And I think personally, this has my favorite Disney soundtrack of all time. Like Phil Collins basically doing the entire soundtrack for the most part is incredible. The mixture of jungle drums and that Phil Collins Genesis like tech sound with his vocals and harmonies, and the animation style is so dynamic in this movie. You have like aerial shots of seeing ropes fall down with like wooden boats, and seeing Tarzan swing around. You wouldn't think that this stuff would like technically look good with the technology they had back then, but they put so much man hours into this movie, blood, sweat, and tears. It feels like, and every shot in that film feels like melted butter on on a hot plate. You just see it sizzling and make a perfect line. It just looks so beautiful. The film is just exquisite. The voice acting is incredible. The characters are fun. I even loved them in the spin-off show Tarzan. I think it was Tarzan and Jane, or Tarzan: The Adventures of Tarzan, whatever it was. Maybe it was The Legend of. But Turk and Tambor, I love them. They're funny. They're some good comedic relief. The villain of the movie, very threatening, and he's like his source material counterpart. And I think Disney did a fine approach into adapting kind of a dark story and involving his backstory and making it more family friendly, but you still get the sense that what happened to his parents is not PG whatsoever, because it's a harsh reality. And I think that was the first thing that ever opened my eyes to losing a loved one. I never really thought about that as a kid until I watched Tarzan. I'm like, wait, he lost his parents. I remember how emotional that made me feel. And whenever I think about this movie, I think about the first time I watched it. I actually saw this in the theaters when it released. I was super into this brand. um, but yeah, Tarzan. Not so much big on the Tarzan and Jane straight to video movie. I'm gonna put that out there. That's basically like a TV episode that they try to pass off like a movie. But that Walt Disney picture, fantastic. If they try to live action remake it, I don't know how that would register. But this would probably be one of the better ones because you actually have humans already in the source material. So we'll see how Hercules and some other ones go before we get to Tarzan, I guess. But yeah, I love this movie.
Yeah, Tarzan is pretty fun. I've only seen it probably like once or twice, but it's definitely a really good one. There's a lot of, again, great music. You'll Be in My Heart is a really nice Disney song that I think really just, I don't know, hits me emotionally, I guess. I don't really know how to describe it, but it's a solid song. And the other songs are pretty fun too. And I gotta give a shout out too for Disney having the balls to kill off Clayton in the way that they do. That has got to be one of the darkest Disney villain deaths of all time. And I love that they had the balls to do it. And I'm honestly shocked they haven't tried to cut that out of modern releases.
I hate to plug in Goosebumps, but Clayton's death in that movie reminds me of Ahmed's death in Curse of the Mummy's Tomb and Goosebumps. Like it's almost eerily similar, but I think that's why I like Tarzan so much is because that it has the stones to be dark, but it also has this fun Disney movie like in the Renaissance era with the catchy music like shibby dibby doo bop boo doo. You know that song?
Mhm.
I love that when Turk and them are banging on the camp stuff. That's so much fun, and it's
Yeah.
like it's good time killer to sit through. You know?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
fun.
So my number 8 is gonna be another hot take because for a lot of Disney fans, if you don't have this movie as like your number one spot, you're basically disgracing everything about Disney. And so I know I'm gonna get a lot of heat for this one, but my number 8 is The Lion King. Now, don't get me wrong, Lion King is an amazing movie. Still hits the top 10. Like you can't argue that this is a good movie. It's beautiful animation, great voice acting from everybody, one of the most like heart-wrenching emotional moments for the character death in Disney with Mufasa's death and just how they kind of handled that, like having a kid as young as Simba having to watch his father just be killed basically, and then just like have that whole moment where he's like realizing Mufasa is dead is just such like, I don't know, there's just something so like grim about that, like having to watch such a young child have to come to terms with that so early. And then, Scar, obviously, fantastic Disney villain. He's just one of the most like intimidating. And there's a lot of them who do this, but he's one of the few that actually gets a genuine on screen murder. And just the way he manipulates everything is just really intense. How he basically convinces Simba that his death is his fault and forces him to run away into this wilderness, basically, and just basically to leave him out there to die and just so he can become the king is just one of those, I don't know, it's one of those really interesting villain motivations that I think just works very well for his character. And Jeremy Irons' voice acting performance is great in there, as again all the voice actors, James Earl Jones, Jonathan Taylor Thomas, even Matthew Broderick, who's usually a very awkward actor. He nails the adult Simba very well. And it's great iconic music, Circle of Life, Be Prepared, one of the best villain songs, Hakuna Matata, all those songs just are very classic, iconic songs. It's just a very vibrant and colorful movie. There's just a lot to love about it. To me, though, the reason I kind of just hold it back a little more is just, I don't know, I find it's kind of lackluster in some areas, mainly in like the part where you kind of first meet Timon and Pumbaa and stuff. I know a lot of people like Timon and Pumbaa. I do too, but I think that's kind of where the movie drags a little bit from the first part of it. But otherwise, I still think it's a great movie and still deserves the top 10 no matter what, and still deserves the love it gets.
I guess I'm gonna catch a lot of heat because I didn't even have Lion King in my top 10. But I did mention to you, out of all the Disney animated movies out there, there's so many. Lion King's actually one of the few I own on physical because the movie, to me, is an absolute classic. And to me, I think this is the most Shakespearean Goosebumps. I mean, not Goosebumps. Disney has ever gotten. Sorry, I have Goosebumps on the brain all the time, y'all. But like when you look at the story of the Lion King, it plays out like a William Shakespeare epic. It plays out like a Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet, and you have so many, acts with different characters that offer their own piece to the puzzle in the story. You have underlying, themes of internal struggles with power and trying to step all over people to get that power. It has that you know Oscar bait drama thing going on for it. And I believe this movie won Disney a crap ton of awards when it came out,
Mhm.
and it's deserved because it's a fantastic script. It has a fantastic animation team behind it. It has a fantastic soundtrack. I mean, just it's an icon of cinema, really is. But it's not in my top 10. But I can understand if almost everybody out there has it there. Like I'm not going to complain. I have a more acquired taste. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I think this movie's fantastic.
And like you saying, it feels like a Shakespearean thing. I mean, that's because it's actually a loose adaptation of Hamlet. That's like the
Yeah,
whole
that's
thing with
exactly
it.
what it is. You
So
know,
yeah.
but it's creative. It's like
Hmm.
when people say, "I want to put a modern spin or a fresh new take on this idea." Look to Lion King and how it did Hamlet. You know, it's basically Hamlet, but they put their whole own original idea around it.
Hmm.
And it created something magnificent. And it reimagined it for the modern audience in the right way. You're not just going to Hamlet and, keeping the thou art, blah, 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 that Shakespeare put in there. No, you make it fun. You make it stand out. You put the touch on it, like, hey, we're gonna make it about uh big cats in the African, I forget what they call it,
Pride Lands.
Pride Lands. Yeah. It's one of those things that, when you see lightning in a bottle, you don't normally, people are marveling at that. That's what Lion King was when it came out. It was lightning in a bottle. It basically helped legitimize the Renaissance era of Disney as like possibly the greatest era of Disney ever, for being honest. Some people might debate that because, especially when you see my number seven, this is one of the first things that I think Disney ever actually put out. So, but yeah.
All right. So moving on. What is your number 7?
So, this, in my opinion, without a shred of a doubt, I don't think there's any competition. This is the best animated movie ever made. You can debate this, Disney heads, saying that this is the best Disney animated movie. I don't care what you say. But without this movie, animation cinema would not be what it is. Not. Talking about Fantasia slash Fantasia 2000. Look, it's an anthology. It's acquired, but man, do these movies hold up. And I'm telling you, when you see these movies in an IMAX screen, it's almost like, if I could envision this, dying and being sent to your most ideal paradise utopia in the afterlife. It's like witnessing that, but you're just watching a film. you know, it's beautiful. The animation, I don't think, has ever been as good in Disney than in these movies. Even Fantasia 2000, which I know a lot of people don't have near and dear to their hearts as the original Fantasia, but holy crap, the music and the art style. I mean, there's so many things going on here. It's almost like a work of art than a film. You know what I mean? Without this movie and without Walt Disney taking a chance and saying, "Look, we can change animation forever by showing them the technology." Because back then, animation studios like Walt Disney, they were much smaller than the big guys, and the big guys didn't really pay them any attention because they thought that moving pictures was supposed to be real actors. They didn't see the appeal in putting cards together and just putting them on slides and doing it real fast to show animation. Not a lot of people cared about that, but Disney was the first, really one of the first pioneers to say, no, 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 we can do something cool with this. And then once World War II came around, in that era of film, people started to really turn on the bandwagon that, hey, animation is cool, because it was a cheap way, or a cheaper way, to have some interstitial entertainment in the mix, and it was also a way to showcase things that were kind of becoming pop culture phenomenon, like the Superman shorts from back in the day. Those were groundbreaking at the time, and those were some of the first ways that kids got to experience that character, because I guarantee you a lot of them back then lived out in rural areas and probably had to drive with their families to go to a theater, and they didn't have a newspaper rack. They were lucky they had a gas station that had comic books, you know. So, looking at Fantasia, this was like, it just opened the eyes to the whole country and even the world what animation could be. And after that movie, there were so many changes in the realm of animation. So Fantasia is my number seven, and I think it's by far the best Disney animated movie ever made.
Yeah, that's a solid one as well. I do think that. I think it's a really interesting idea too to have basically just an anthology movie where every segment pretty much has no dialogue. It's just animated segments to like animated to classical music. Like it's a very interesting idea that I wouldn't see many other studios doing, and it's just something that it works very well. Taking all these different classical pieces and animating these very drastically different segments with it. I mean, I think for me as a horror fan, the standout segment is Night on Ball Mountain. But there's a lot of other great segments. I can't remember all of them because I haven't seen it in a while. But there's that dinosaur segment that's really cool. That's the one that appealed to me as a kid because I was a big dinosaur kid.
Mhm.
But it's just a very fun movie, very creative. Obviously the imagery of Sorcerer Mickey is one of those very iconic pieces of imagery for Disney. For a while in the parks, the Sorcerer Mickey hat was the symbol of Hollywood studios. And it's just one of those very iconic things that's just stuck with Disney for a while. So I agree. I didn't put it on my list because I just prefer the movies that have more of the dialogue, actual like lyrical song stuff. But I still can see why you would think it's really great.
Yeah, I just think it kind of transcends being a movie. It's like a piece of art that is important. Like if this should be on the movies to watch before you die, at least on that top 20 range. Like you have to watch this movie. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really the only movie, maybe outside of another film that you'll see higher on this list, that a lot of people would probably agree with that. Maybe Lion King too, since we already brought up Lion King. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Fantasia, I would say, is in that discussion.
For sure. All right. So my number 7 is the only other live action movie on my list. That is Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl. This is one of my all-time favorite like live action Disney movies. It's another ride-based movie. I'm a Disney parks nerd, and you can see I have a Pirates of the Caribbean poster right over there. So like Pirates and Haunted Mansion are two of my favorite rides in the parks. So the way they did it in the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie was just very well done because the original ride that opened up in like I think the 60s or like I think 60s was didn't have a lot of story to it. It was a very basic, just kind of experience. You ride through these scenes of pirates pillaging a town, and that's pretty much all there was to it. So they had a lot to work with, taking that and turning it into a movie. And the way they did it was just very fun. It's just this great PG-13 action movie. You got, of course, Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow, who is just one of the most iconic Disney characters of all time. So much so that they added him into the ride later on. Just his performance as Jack Sparrow is one of those legendary performances and probably his most iconic performance out of a plethora of iconic performances. And I just think that he works so well in this environment. You got the whole idea, like the horror elements involved in it, in the curse of Captain Barbossa and the Black Pearl ship, where they all turn into skeletons under the moonlight. Those visuals and those effects are still hold up to this day. For being 2003, the effects look really good, especially the transitions between them standing in the shadows and then walking into the moonlight and becoming skeletons. Like that effect just works so well. There's a very fun climax fight involving Sparrow and Barbossa where they're going in and out of the moonlight and becoming skeletons and then going back to normal and stuff. That's always really fun. You got all the other side characters, Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann, who are played by Orlando Bloom and Kate was I can't remember the other actress's
Keira
name.
Knightley.
Yep, Keira Knightley. They're both great and really fun little side characters in there. Again, Barbossa is a great villain, and this whole crew on the Black Pearl are all very fun. And of course, you got when you talk about Pirates of the Caribbean, the score is one of the best like movie scores of all time. He's a Pirate is just one of those movie themes that's just kind of stood the test of time and is still one of the most beloved and iconic movie themes. And it's just a fun movie. It's a great story, and it's just a really interesting and well done way of adapting such a simple ride that doesn't really have a lot of story into this grand movie that spanned multiple movies at this point that are all pretty solid films.
Yeah, I remember seeing Curse of the Black Pearl when it released that weekend, whenever it came out. And I remember it was a packed, I mean packed theater. And this was back in the day when you had the stadium seats and pretty much everywhere, and the small ones at that, and they sardine you in there. Everybody was hooting and hollering about this movie. I mean, everybody was like saying it was incredible after, and I thought it was awesome. I love these movies, especially like the first three. Once we get past that, I think they start to kind of dip a little bit in quality.
Mhm.
But like this and Dead Man's Chest, I mean, name a better back to back, film from Disney where they just pack the punch like that. I don't even think Pixar movies have done that. And some people might say Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 2, or, but other than that, name one. You can't.
Mhm.
I mean, those two movies are incredible. I mean, it didn't make my top 10 because I think I like National Treasure more, but I did contemplate putting the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise on there because it blends historical fiction, swashbuckler adventure, and horror all in one. And it's like its own weird it's like it has its own weird fantasy element to it as well, where there's some supernatural things going on that they like to play around with, like the Davy Jones character in the second movie. I
Mhm.
love Davy Jones. I love Captain Barbosa. The guy who plays Captain Barbosa, he is a fantastic actor. Fantastic. Jeffrey Rush, I think. He plays the villain in, I think, one of my biggest oddball favorite movies of all time called Mystery Men. I mean, I just love Jeffrey Rush. I mean, he's incredible. I mean, I haven't seen one film that he's been in that I did not like. So yeah, great pick. Great pick.
All right.
Um,
So what is your number 6 now?
all right, so I've been obsessed with this movie pretty much all my life. It's a live action movie. I know it has this overexposure these days. It's definitely overexposed. And if I'm being honest, I'm tired of seeing it everywhere. But it has one of my favorite characters, in my opinion, from the Disney lineup in the history of Disney characters. And I have a collection of him in my glass display cabinet over here. I didn't pull any of them out, but I have lots of figures of this character. It's Hocus Pocus, and I'm referring to Billy Butcherson.
Mhm.
Hocus Pocus is that comfort food kind of movie for me with when I think about Disney. It's one movie that I have to watch every year around Halloween. It has memorable songs, great acting. And I think it has a very dark premise for a live action Disney movie about, um, a kid getting killed as a virgin, trying to save his sister, who also gets killed. And he's turned into a cat. Well, he's not really killed, but he's turned into a cat, right? And you fast forward into the future, and you got the kid from Erie, Indiana, Max, I think is his name. He moves to Salem, Massachusetts, where it's like Halloween capital of the United States, and he meets a girl and tries to impress her, and starts this whole night of mischief involving the Sanderson sisters. And the Sanderson sisters, to me, they aren't scary, but when you think about Disney and like the iconography and the missed opportunities that Disney has come across in their own follies over the years, not having a Sanderson sister ride in like Hollywood studios is the dumbest thing they've ever missed out on. I think it would have been super popular, like a flying broomstick ride, or like maybe like a Universal type attraction where you have some motion cap, screen stuff going on with the brooms. But even then, I think this film, it holds up. I mean, it's not the greatest thing ever when you think about it, but it's classic, 90s Disney to me. I think 90s live action Disney has some of the best live action Disney movies ever made, and not a lot of people give them credit because this was also the era where Disney was shifting live action over into its sister, labels like Hollywood and Touchstone, and it was also going Walt Disney Home Video with it all. But Hocus Pocus, absolutely love this movie. I don't have anything else to say. Billy Butcherson is one of my top 5 favorite Disney characters of all time.
Yeah, Hocus Pocus is a fun movie. And like I think like especially some of the music like really stands out to me because I'm a music guy. Like I love musicals, just music in general. And like, just a couple of the songs, their version of "I Put a Spell on You" is just this very upbeat and very different version of the original song. I can't remember who originally sang it, but the original version is just very like slower, kind of jazzy song or a kind of big band sounding. And then the version from I Put a Spell from Hocus Pocus is very much more this kind of upbeat, kind of more pop version of it. And it's just a very fun song that I always just love to listen to. It's essential on my Halloween playlist every year. And
Mhm.
then, of course, you got Come Little Children, which is one of the creepiest Disney songs ever written. And just like the way it's written and the way they perform it is just like, it sends a shiver down your spine because it just brings to life a lot of more real world horrors that Disney does. Disney likes to go to the more real world horrors and like evils of the real world a lot of the time. And I think that song just kind of encapsulates all of that in a very good way. That just really, again, it sends a chill whenever you hear that song and just the whole idea behind what the Sanderson sisters are trying to do. There's a lot of good jokes in there. I think it's just a very fun movie, and I agree with you there.
One of my favorite jokes is, when they see all the trick or treaters when they get off the bus and they find the married couple and they think they're talking to Satan himself and they're like oohing and eyeing over him. And the wife's like, "What do you three think you're doing?" She kicks him out of the house. I love that scene every time I watch that movie. But going back to some shocking stuff, like you see them not get on screen, but kind of on screen get hanged. You see, um, uh, there's a scene in the back half that implies some bodily harm to a certain character. Um, my favorite character, Billy Butcherson, that scared the crap out of me as a kid every time I watched it. But yeah, I mean, this movie lives rent free in my head. I don't think Thora Birch, who plays the younger sister, Danny, in the movie, when every time I watch it, I notice that her acting isn't the greatest. But I think Max and I don't remember the girl's name who plays his love interest, but I think they give pretty solid performances. They really do help carry the movie, and they're also equally as memorable to me as Binks and Billy Butcherson and the Sanderson sisters, which I think is the reason why a lot of people are fatigued with this movie nowadays. I think if you would have talked about this movie 10 years ago, this would have been a common one on top tens. But because of the overexposure, people are like, okay, we've had enough of Hocus Pocus. I get it, but it's still in my favorites.
Hmm.
So
And like what I've noticed though as well, when you mentioned like bad child actors, I feel like now as a Goosebumps and now kind of growing Are You Afraid of the Dark fan, you kind of become desensitized to bad kid acting and you're much more forgiving towards it a lot of the time because that's kind of just the standard of those 90s horror shows.
yeah, the shows. But if we're talking about movies, right?
Hmm.
Thor. I mean, she's not like I said, she's not terrible by any means. She's very passable. But there are some scenes with her that I think they probably could have reshot, if I'm being honest.
Hmm.
But it is what it is. This movie still holds up.
Oh yeah.
I still love it for its imperfections.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So my number 6 is another one of the classic Disney Renaissance films, and that is Beauty and the Beast. I think
Mhm.
this is another one of those absolute classic Disney movies. Has some of the probably most beautiful animation and some of the best shots in all of Disney. It's a very unique movie. It's just very fun with the idea of it, while also being kind of, again, dark with some of the backstory. How it's this spoiled prince who refuses this woman in this like haggard old woman inside for shelter during a storm. And she ends up cursing him by transforming him into a beast and the rest of his staff into common household objects. And he has until the last rose petal falls from this rose to find love and basically improve and become a better person and have someone love him back. And if that doesn't happen, he is be trapped as a beast forever. The rest of the people will be trapped as household objects forever. And that backstory is just very interesting to me. It's kind of this spoiled brat kind of getting his karma and kind of seeing how that kind of transpires with him when as the beast years later. Belle is a great main protagonist in here. She's one of the more strong-willed Disney like female leads. This the whole thing of just her basically wanting to get out of this small town life that she pretty much just doesn't fit in. Nobody really appreciates her because she has this love of reading, which is something that everybody in the town thinks is just this weird thing that like nobody should know how to do. And of course, that she is then under pursuit of Gaston, who is just this pompous douchebag, who is, he's the main villain of the movie. And it's just a very fun villain, because the first half, of the movie, he's not really your traditional Disney villain. He's just this kind of self-centered, egotistical kind of person who's just pretty much just doesn't take no for an answer. And then it kind of just devolves further on as he starts, learns about the beast and learns how Belle is basically falling in love with this beast instead of him. So he just takes this 180 turn and has the whole town mob up to come into his castle and kill the beast. And of course, that ends up being his downfall. But Gaston is one of the most fun Disney villains. I love him as a villain. He's great. The songs, once again, very memorable, very fun. As with pretty much all the Disney Renaissance, Alan Menken can pretty much do no wrong in terms of his composition and musical scores. And again, there's just a lot of great shots. The whole ballroom scene, the Beauty and the Beast song, one of the best looking visuals of Disney. Having the combination of using a 3D model for the ballroom and then having the 2D animated characters there, it works very well. It's beautifully lit. There's some beautiful camera movements in that shot. And it's just another one of those movies that's just stood the test of time. And I know a lot of people like to hate on it because it's Stockholm Syndrome, which, I mean, I could kind of argue that, but it's a very different thing because, you see the beast gradually grow and become a better person as a result. And that's why Belle starts getting feelings for him. She didn't, if she started getting feelings for him when he was still a horrible person, then yeah, I could get the Stockholm Syndrome arguments. But, again, just having their relationship slowly build, and it isn't really until the beast starts changing and becoming better that she falls for him. I feel like it's just, it's one of those just more unique love stories that I think works very well for a Disney standard. And yeah, I just think it's a great movie.
Yeah, I've always kind of lumped Beauty and the Beast as like just one of the outright Disney princess movies. But if I had to pick a favorite one in that typecast, it would be that. It's probably it has more appeal to a male demographic, I would say, because the Beast is a lot more of a nuanced character than your average prince character that you see in Disney.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no offense to Cinderella or even Little Mermaid for that matter, which was a movie that came around the same time, but the Beast is by far the most captivating of the prince characters from that typecast of Disney animated films. And yeah, you know, I've seen this and the live action. I might have a hot take with the live action, but I think it's almost equally as good in some areas as the animated version. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably my favorite live action they've done. And I know that's a hot take, but I legit like the story. I don't outright love it or anything because it's not a movie that I have to watch. But if it's on and I'm in the mood to watch a Disney movie, I'll sit down and watch it. So I understand why it's on here, and I agree. It is a fantastically made movie, like almost all the animated Renaissance movies are. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree with you on the live action one. I mean, pretty much, like, there are some bad live action remakes, but a lot of them get way too much hate, in my opinion. I think there are a lot of really solid ones. And in my opinion, that might be a hot take, but I think the live action Little Mermaid is actually better than the original. So that's just my opinion on it, just because it expands some of the characters more. But yeah, I think the live action Beauty and the Beast is so solid. The only thing that holds it back for me is Emma Watson's very auto-tuned singing voice. And it's painfully so. But I
But
still think it's very good.
but I love how they recreated Beast Castle in the live
Mm-hmm.
action, and the snowy tundra looked incredible. And I think what Josh Gad is in the movie.
Yep.
He was funny. He
I
was
know he was great
legitimately
as
funny.
LeFou. And I
Yeah,
think the guy who played Gaston did a good job too. I think his name is Luke Evans.
yeah, Luke Evans. Yeah,
And also it does, the live action does one of my favorite Disney songs ever, which is Evermore, the song that the Beast sings after the Belle leaves to go back to get everybody. That song is just such a beautiful song that's always stood as one of my favorites, and I think it's a very underappreciated song. But yeah, I think the live action Beauty and the Beast is definitely better than most people give it credit for.
yeah, for sure.
All right, so what is your number 5 now? We're in the top 5.
All right, top five. Okay, top five. This movie is actually a movie that I got to experience for the first time recently, and I think that this movie just speaks to me on every level, every conceivable level that speaks to me on my love of cinema. This to me imbues classic cinema. This is a throwback Disney movie, actually, from the early 80s. It's an adaptation of Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes. This movie, I'm shocked Disney made this and they put a label on it. It was actually so prolific that it actually helped cause the foundation of Touchstone Pictures being made. Because Disney, after this movie came out, and after this movie kind of bombed at the box office because people didn't know how to react to Disney making a horror film, um, they had to, adapt and find a new avenue to make these kind of movies. But I'm glad they made this movie, man. This movie is terrifying. It is scary for a PG movie. Holy crap. I mean, what these two main character kids see in this movie of this traveling carnival that has something to do with, going through these small towns in the US and coming kind of like you ever seen the movie Jeepers Creepers where it comes around every, so often 17 years or whatever? That's kind of like this carnival, and it comes by, once every generation or every other generation to come take people from these towns and get them out of this small town life that they're stuck in. And that's what this movie's really coming to commentate on. But holy crap, the villain of the story who runs this carnival and what he does to his circus performers is terrifying. There's plenty of harrowing moments where, you have one of the kids, his father runs the library, I think, or is like maybe the mayor of the town, I forget. But he has some experience with knowing about what this carnival is, and he's kind of suppressed a memory about it, and you unfold that mystery. And then, of course, the other kid's mom is perhaps being targeted, and then some people around them are coming after them, and you see some iconic, I should say, 70s grindhouse actors in this movie, like Pam Grier's in the film, and some other people you might recognize. Um, and it has some of the best practical effects that I've seen in a Disney movie by far. And yeah, I just think this movie is incredible. Like it imbues classic cinema to me. Like when I think of a live action movie that I think is the most underrated from Disney ever made, it's this one. It deserves a critical reevaluation. It deserves people to finally check it out and see what it does. Some people I've heard say they like the book better, which is more of a poetic writing style than the movie is, which is kind of like the every person's telling of the story. But yeah, if it's as good as the book, I'll check the book out. But I love this movie, and I'm gonna keep singing the songs of its praise until I die, basically.
Yeah, I've never actually seen this movie all the way through, but I've seen like bits and pieces of it throughout. Like I've seen like the electric chair scene and like the guillotine scene. Those are like the two ones that I remember seeing that really stuck out to me. Like the fact that again, like that guillotine scene, that Disney had the balls to go there and basically show a kid get decapitated, even if it
With
was just like
blood,
a vision, is still like wild that they got
with
away with that.
blood, with blood, and it's a
Mhm.
family movie technically. Well, I don't think PG-13 was a thing when this movie got made yet,
Mm.
but I'm pretty sure if it was, it would have been that at the very least.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, even the thing is, like, even with blood, though, like, even with PG-13, you can't really get away with showing a ton of blood. So,
but like the whole body melt scene and the you haven't seen that, but if you watch the whole movie and you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not going to say where it is in the movie, but holy crap, man! If I saw that as a kid, I would have been traumatized. Okay, luckily I saw it as an adult, but yeah, go watch this movie out there, y'all. Give this movie a critical re-evaluation, please.
yeah, I'll have to check that out at some point. It definitely seems like something to be up my alley. So, I'll have to
Oh
see
yeah,
what it's like.
sure. I think you would love it for real. Just give it a chance.
All right. So, my number 5 is Lilo and Stitch. This is one of my absolute favorite Disney movies. Obviously, it's in the top 5 for a reason. I think Stitch is probably my favorite Disney character of all time. I just think the way Chris Sanders just plays him is so fun and just he's just a very energetic and silly character, but it works so well for the sake of this movie. And it's a movie of two halves, really. You got this very high energy, goofy, fun side with the alien storyline, with Jumba and Pleakley coming down to basically take Stitch and bring him back because he is this dangerous genetic experiment that basically was designed to destroy everything. And when it eventually escapes and lands in Hawaii, this girl named Lilo, who is very prone to violence and is very, kind of your standard kid. She's probably the most realistic kid character of any in all of Disney. And, she basically goes to adopt a dog, sees Stitch, who disguises himself as a dog in this pound, and takes him home. And then just, hijinks ensue with that. But it does have this really strong emotional core between Lilo and her sister Nani, who, have this really sad backstory of, their parents dying in a car accident. And just basically Nani is in this struggle to find a job and hold a job so that she can keep custody of Lilo, because she has this threat of these protective service people coming in to basically take Lilo away from her and put her into a more responsible home. So you have this whole dynamic there with their sisterly bond, and just Nani trying to balance being both a sister and kind of a mother figure for Lilo. And it's a really great like dynamic between those two. There's a lot of really good emotional moments with them that I think just really hit hard. I think that again, just all the stuff with Stitch is just very fun and kind of adds that kind of lightheartedness to the some of the emotional moments. And they even give Stitch like emotional moments, like that whole scene after he runs away and takes Lilo's Ugly Duckling book and it just sits in the middle of the forest and just starts calling out that he's lost and just looking around. Like there's just so much heart behind this movie that it just works so well. I love, of course, that they include Elvis as a big part of it. I'm a big Elvis fan, so that's a lot of fun to have a lot of his, music played around in there and all that stuff. The background art is just beautifully painted. They're all watercolor paintings, and they're all beautifully done. And it's just one of those movies that just, again, just has such a great balance of heart and comedy, and it just blends together so well for me. And I'm honestly like super excited to see what they do with the live action one later this year. So yeah, I love Lilo and Stitch.
Lilo and Stitch almost made my top 10. It was my number 11. I almost put it on there, but I still think that this movie is incredible as you think. Um, to me, Lilo and Stitch, I think, was like the first animated movie from Disney I can remember watching that wasn't some public domain character adaptation or some story that's been around for hundreds of years or 100 years ago or whatnot. This was 100% a new concept they rolled with and put a major budget behind. And I think the content hunger from fans wanting just an original story from Disney in that capacity definitely satiated an entire market, and it spawned arguably one of the best Disney Channel original cartoon shows, which was Lilo and Stitch the series. Incredible show. The straight to video sequels get kind of dicey, but you get to meet a lot of Stitch's family in those, and there's a whole big mythology and underlying story that you get from the sister material. But for this being like the template and the starting place, it's a great foundation, and you really get to see Lilo, who is kind of like an emotionally unstable girl. And it's playing on those um, behavioral issues that kids can have. And I've seen a lot of people say that, hey, I have behavioral issues and I plug myself into Lilo and she's very realistic. I get that. And if you feel that way, that's awesome. But I used to feel that way when I was a kid. So when I saw Lilo, I felt that too. So I think Lilo, you're on the money. It's one of the more easily relatable characters, at least for me. But I think generally people see the appeal in her. I love Jumbo and Bleakley. I love Gantu, Experiment 625. I love them all. I think all the surrounding characters in this movie are all memorable. And blending, a story about a girl trying to adopt a dog to fix some behavioral issues she has in her life with a cosmic alien invasion story is wild. And it sounds like it should not work, but it really does work. And it's iconic, and I see why it's getting a live action, or it has gotten a live action. I can't remember if it's come out yet or not. I haven't seen it though, but I do want to watch it because I love Stitch, and Stitch is probably my top 5 favorite Disney characters. I've already brought up Billy Butcherson. Stitch will be on that too. Uh, he's funny. He's adorable, and he's kind of scary when he wants to be. He has a lot of powers, like super strength. What does he have? Does he have like acid spit or something? Something wild
Something
like
like
that.
that. Hmm.
But yeah, he's a conundrum of a character, but his personality is, his whole arc is he's literally designed to be a walking death machine. And through being a dog, he learns to be obedient, but he also learns self-control. And he kind of struggles with that, as you'll see if you get more well versed into the Lilo and Stitch world and the universe of that franchise. But for the most part, what keeps him stable is his love for Lilo and his friendship with her. And I've always found that impactful. And I love Nani and her boyfriend. I think they're great characters, and they're very unconventional for parent characters in Disney. So yeah, great pick, great pick. I love Lilo and Stitch.
And also, when you talk about Lilo and Stitch, you can't help but not talk about the marketing for that movie.
Yeah,
That is one of the best marketing campaigns of any Disney movie, of Stitch crashing other famous Disney movie sequences. They are so good and so funny, especially the Aladdin one, because the Aladdin one makes me question Jasmine. I'll just say that because that involves Stitch pulling up behind Aladdin and Jasmine on the magic carpet in his big spaceship and basically steals Jasmine away from Aladdin and just flies off with her. And it's, I don't know, there's just something about that marketing strategy that's just, it was geniusly done and just really funny and just really showcases like the chaos that Stitch has as a character.
now that I'm thinking on it, like Lilo and Stitch was part of that era where we got like Emperor's New Groove and Home on the Range and all these like new Millennium Disney movies. And I can really appreciate this time period more now that I'm thinking on it now, about how Disney kind of shifted from going from public domain stuff into trying to do more original stories. Some fared better than others, like Emperor's New Groove and Lilo and Stitch spawned franchises and stuff like Home on the Range. Nobody ever talks about, but or Chicken Little. But you know what I mean? It's hit or miss in this era. But Lilo and Stitch by far is my favorite of that whole time period.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, what is your number 4?
All right, so my number 4 is a beloved franchise. I don't think there's a bad movie in the mix. Toy Story. Toy Story. Toy Story. I love the original Toy Story. I think it's one of my top 10 favorite movies ever made, for sure. I love Toy Story 3. I think it's probably objectively the best movie. I know a lot of people say Toy Story 3 is better than the original. I personally love the original more because I'm a kid's horror guy. Look, that movie should not be as scary as it is, but holy crap, it really does work. And I get like on a storytelling, capacity, it's literally about, a guy who is the top dog and he gets replaced and he's trying to eliminate the competition, but then learns that, you can live with them and you don't have to be in competition. You can, be equally loved by his owner, right? I get like on a storytelling narrative, it's not as strong as 3 or maybe even 4, but I think the original Toy Story is an absolute masterpiece. And it took these creators years with shifting technology. Mind you, when they first started this movie, I heard a rumor that they actually had the concept in hand in the late 80s. And they were trying desperately to keep up with the times. And as technology kept improving, Pixar kept adapting and kept having to redo everything. So bless all the people who worked on this film because you broke history. You made the first completely computer animated movie ever made. And it won a lot of awards. It put Tom Hanks and Tim Allen as household names that they weren't already. And these two gentlemen aren't even voice actors, but I think they have the most distinct voices in Disney history. Like Woody and Buzz are some of the most iconic animated Disney characters of all time. So much so, you go to the Disney parks, Toy Story has its own land. Name another
Mhm.
name another franchise that has its own land in Disney. Not a lot. There's not a lot. Toy Story has it, and it's because of Buzz and Woody and their friendship. I mean, I love these movies to pieces. Toy Story 2 is probably my least favorite of the bunch. And then it's 4, then it's 3, then it's 1. But All of them are great. None of them get less than an A for me. They're all fantastic. Um, and going across the whole franchise, Rex, he's a funny character, and he gets better as he goes on. I love Ham. I love the three aliens. You saved our lives. We're eternally grateful. And the whole claw machine scene in the first movie is absolutely iconic. Pizza Planet is like one of the only things in Disney history where you literally see it in one movie, and it's almost inconsequential to the story. It's just a setting, but it has almost equal iconography for looking as cool as it does. Because every kid, at least in my generation growing up, wanted there to be an actual Pizza Planet. And I think at one point there was one in the Disney parks, but
Mhm.
I vaguely remember being at it. But they should have made Pizza Planet an actual franchise. It could have beat Chuck E.
Mhm.
Cheese. I'm saying it. It's never too late,
Mhm.
Disney. It's never too late. Never too late. But Toy Story, I love these movies to pieces. They're incredible, and I'm glad that we're getting a fifth movie. I'm gonna be there opening weekend when it happens. And I know some people say they didn't want Toy Story to die. As long as the quality's still there, I'm gonna say keep bringing them.
Mhm. Yeah, Toy Story is definitely one of those fun movies. Again, that's very influential in terms of just animation and the progression of it. Even though I'm not a big fan of 3D animation, like Toy Story is, you still got to give Toy Story the credit it deserves for kicking off Disney into this new era and just kind of bringing in, this whole new studio and just being one of the most successful animated movies of all time. And, while the human characters in the first one don't age the best, I think it's still just one of those movies that's just very nostalgic for me. I watched it a lot growing up. We had it on VHS. And so, I watched it a lot. And it's just a very fun movie. Sid is easily one of the most like fun Disney villains, I guess. Honestly, I wouldn't even consider him a villain because he's just a kid using his imagination when you think about it. Because, like, in his defense, he doesn't know the toys are alive. So he's just having some fun with the toys he has, even if it is messed up. And, like, the fact that at the end of that movie, these toys basically give this kid lifelong trauma. Just like, it's just really a funny, like, downside for this poor kid. You honestly feel kind of bad for. And I think even in Toy Story 3, like, it's been confirmed that the garbage man who was like drumming on the bins and like picking up the garbage that the toys were out in, that was Sid, all like when he was grown up. So, like, life isn't doing him very many favors after that encounter, but it's still a really fun franchise. And I do agree that they're really solid films.
Yeah, I have them all on physical, and I love it. Like I said, I've loved them ever since I was a kid. I think my childhood would not be what it was without the original Toy Story, and it's always going to be a movie that when I think of Disney, that's one of the first things I'm going to think of. And that's how I
For
try to
sure.
format my top five.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I can definitely see why you picked that on your list. All right. So my number 4 is actually one you just mentioned in our Lilo and Stitch segment, The Emperor's New Groove. I just, I love this movie so much ever since I saw it. It's just one of those Disney comedies. It's probably the best Disney comedy, in my opinion. Just everything meshes together so well from all the voice actors, John Goodman, David Spade, of course, Patrick Warburton, who's like, he has one of the best performances of all time as Kronk. I think Kronk is easily one of my favorite male Disney characters in general. Another top 5 one for me, alongside Stitch and a few others. His comedy works so beautifully in this movie, just being this big dumb buffoon who works for Yzma, who's another great, very comedic side like villain in Disney. And just the whole like setup of this movie is just so bizarre. Where Yzma basically wants to get rid of Kuzco because he's this big emperor who just he fires her. So she has this plot to kill him, but accidentally turns him into a llama for the simple little thing that the potion label was folded down to make it look like a skull. It was really like a llama set image on there. Just one of the most weird plots out there, like to kick off a movie. And then to have him basically be taken by this peasant named Pacha and just basically have this whole buddy comedy journey to get him back to the palace, to turn him back to normal. And all of these hijinks and just very insane situations these two get themselves in, which they would have not have survived like half the things that happened to them in this movie. But Everything about it is just so fun. Every character just has so much energy and just it's just great comedy. Kuzco has one of the best arcs, I think, of just a Disney character, just going from this selfish, egotistical prick to this guy who's just, has a very kind-hearted person who is basically becomes close friends with Pacha and just has this big reformed arc to him. And just everything about what happens in this movie, it just makes me laugh and always just leaves me with a smile on my face every time I see it.
Yeah, I love this movie too. Like it's like right behind Lilo and Stitch for me. But I like that you pointed out this is kind of like a buddy comedy. It feels like Tommy Boy or like Black Sheep, but in Disney animated form, with the wildly imaginative idea of setting this in what is it? Aztec culture. I think that's what
Yep.
it is. I mean, it's incredible, and it makes it look like it's actually set in the past. And Poncho, I mean, he has he's like a family guy, and he has a, larger than life scenario thrown into his lap to help save, his farm or whatever. I forget the exact plot point there, but seeing that arc and Cusco kind of realizing that all the things that he does in his kingdom affects people like Poncho, and how he doesn't want that, to hurt people, and he changes because of that is incredible. Yzma, scary looking woman. Scary looking woman, probably the most hideous woman character made in Disney animation, but she's incredible. And Patrick Warburton playing Kronk. Kronk is a fan favorite Disney character for me. I don't know if he'd be in my top five, uh, but he's close. Kronk is funny, and I see why he got his own spin-off movie. And he was
Mhm.
big in the Emperor's New School show. I mean, he's funny. The guy Patrick Warburton. He has a natural knack. He does the same voice in everything he ever does, but for some reason that golden voice is legit. The saving grace in every character he puts that voice into. Kronk is no different. He's hilarious in this. And yeah, I agree. I think it's probably one of the funniest Disney movies for
For
sure.
sure.
For sure.
All right. So what is your number three?
Okay, we're venturing out of theatrical release. We're not quite doing home video, but it's a Disney Channel original movie, so only one on this list. And this is honestly, as a kids horror fan, this is one of my favorite things out of kids horror ever made. Period. I mean, it'd probably be my top 20, and it's called "Don't Look Under the Bed." This movie was banned from airing on Disney Channel for years because kids were getting scared and traumatized from it. It has a reputation, and I can tell you, while it's a very weirdly shot movie, there's a lot of Dutch angles. There's a lot of weird shots going on with some practical effects. I mean, the guy who I think directed, he directed something that's it's going to come to me because I don't remember it off cuff now. But he was involved in something. I think it was Little Monsters from the '80s with Fred Savage. I think he was involved with this. I want to say that's the guy, but I'm probably wrong there. But anyways, this movie is freaky. You know, at the heart of it, it's a story about this high school girl who has a younger brother, I think, with cancer, which is really dark. For a decom, like this kid is like dying from cancer, and she feels like she's being visited by this being that she has repressed in her mind because as she's gotten older, this being who turns out to be her childhood imaginary friend has dissipated from her memory and has kind of fallen into this realm called the boogie world. And in the boogie world, the longer you remain in there as an imaginary friend, you turn from a imaginary friend into a boogeyman. And no, I'm getting this backwards. The guy that she's talking to is actually her little brother's imaginary friend that is coming to her for help to help him not be taken by the boogeyman, who is actually her former imaginary friend. That's what you got to realize. And the whole plot is based around that. And you won't think too much on that because the movie does spend a lot of time in the hijinks between the main character and the brother's imaginary friend. of them kind of butting heads and trying to get involved in the situation to go to the boogie world. But I'm telling you, in the last 30 minutes, this movie kicks it on in high gear with the practical. I think the imaginary friend in the movie is called Larry. Oh my god, what they do to this guy! Oh my god, it is terrifying. The makeup legit scared me as a kid. Like this was one of the decoms I can remember watching, and this was like probably the hardest one for me to watch. I can watch Halloween Town as like a family friendly thing. I could watch maybe Mom's Got a Date with the Vampire, not be too bothered, or Phantom of the Megaplex, which are also childhood favorite decoms. But this movie was like, this is the real deal, the real deal. Honestly, this up there with Something Wicked This Way Comes, in my opinion, is the scariest Disney movie ever made. The fact that this was an original movie for Disney Channel, I think, kind of hurts its legacy, even though the script feels limited. But at the heart of it, if this was a theatrical movie and they had the gall to go with it and kind of push it further than what they could do with the budget and maybe what they had allotted time for syndicated television, I think they could have made something immensely creative here, on a theatrical budget and possibly even scarier. I mean, crap, they were putting stuff out like James and the Giant Peach and stuff in the 90s that were arguably as visually scary as this movie got. But yeah, the Boogeyman villain, one of my favorite kids horror villains of all time. I mean, this being is the real deal. He's trying to abduct kids, even kids with cancer, and turn them into his Boogeyman slaves and do whatever he wants with them. And this Boogie world is immensely creative. I love the set design here. The acting performances are really good for DCOM standards. Now, I'm saying this, not to be unfair to these movies because they often do have some amazing acting going on. But for this type of Disney Channel original movie, this has some exceptional acting. And yeah, I love this movie to pieces. I wish it had a physical release. I wish it did because I would own it. It's perfect in my opinion. I see no wrong. The only thing is there is a specific shot with a doll that is a reoccurring gag in the movie that they always try to pan to create some sort of suspense that the boogeyman is near. That gets old, but other than that, movie's flawless.
Yeah, it's another movie I actually haven't seen. Like I know I've heard of it, and I've seen some bits and again, I've seen bits and pieces of it. I've seen the image of some of like the Larry in his like stages of boogeyman transformation. And that stuff is like freaky. Like I'm surprised they got away with putting that in a movie. Like I can kind of understand why it got banned from TV and would scare some kids because yeah, there's just a lot of stuff in there that's like I'm surprised again, like for something wicked this way comes. I'm surprised they had the gall to go there and be that scary with something like this that's technically geared towards kids. I'm not sure if like I'm almost curious like if they actually wanted it to be that scary or if it just kind of was like some of the directing choices and stuff that ended up making it scarier than they intended to.
I think a lot of it has to deal with just in '90s TV for kids as a whole. The '90s were more open and liberal about what they were doing. They were more for zany, wacky, and scary at the same time. They were willing to push more envelopes than you would see in the new millennium going forward, especially today. You would not see a movie like this made today for kids television. It would be way watered down if it was. But
Mhm.
be thankful it came out around that time. It's also, now that I'm thinking about it, it's also a Christmas movie. So it's set around the
Interesting.
Christmas time. So yeah, Christmas horror for all to cheer. I mean, it's an incredible marvel. Like I said, Something Wicked This Way Comes in this movie are two must-watch horror movies from Disney.
Yeah, I'll
You
have to
need to
check that.
watch
Is it on Disney? Is it on Disney Plus or?
them. I believe it is if it's still on there. I know they took off some movies that really annoy me. I think they took off like Scream Team for some reason,
Hmm.
which I don't get why. I guess they take off movies that don't get watched. But
Hmm.
yeah, don't look under the bed. If it's on there, go watch it.
Yeah,
If
I'll have
not,
to check
I'll
that one
find a
out.
place for you to watch it.
Hmm. All right. So now moving on to my number three. This is one of those Disney movies, in my opinion, is severely underrated. It's probably probably the darkest Disney animated movie of all time, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I think this movie is just It's a phenomenal movie from beginning to end. While there are some things I could have issues with it, which is why it kind of is in the number 3 spot, the gargoyles. I think everything else about this movie is just so great. Just the even just the opening of this movie is one of the most like jaw-dropping and shocking ways to start a Disney movie, with this Romani woman with her baby being chased by Claude Frollo on this black horse, and literally him stealing her baby. She falls down, cracks her head on some concrete stairs, and dies. And then you see a shot of Frollo basically about to drown this baby in a well. And that's just the way you kick off this movie. And it's another one of those things is like, dang, Disney, like you had the balls to go there, didn't you? And it's just like a great way to start it. And of course, you have grown up Quasimodo, who is this bell tower in Notre Dame, who is just kind of this deformed, hunchback who Frollo basically wants to keep hidden from the real world, and kind of manipulates him into thinking that because of the way he looks, people will hate him. And Frollo, easily the most evil Disney villain ever made, in my opinion. Just again, the stuff that this man does, all in the name of being holy, is just very despicable, especially like for me as a Christian. Like when you see people like that who very much do exist in the world, they pose as these high and mighty, holier than thou people. But in real life, and their deepest like secretive, there's these dark and depraved humans. It's just a really like strong message for me. And great villain song as well, Hellfire. Easily, in my opinion, the best Disney villain song ever made. It's just such a deep dive into Frollo's mentality and just the darkness that lurks behind him, and his motivations with Esmeralda, which is just very creepy. And just like, it's just one of those things where, especially when like Esmeralda is supposed to be like 16 or something like that, it makes it so much worse. And just like, and then the whole story as well with Quasimodo, befriending Esmeralda, and kind of finally being able to kind of branch out and realize what Frollo has done in the manipulation, and build up to become this hero who, even though he doesn't get the girl in the end, he still is this worship, like praised person in the town because of his heroic actions. And just, it's a great movie in that sense. Just again, Quasimodo's arc. Frollo's death has got to be one of the most poetic Disney deaths of all time, where he basically quite literally falls into hell visually. That whole scene is really cool. And just there's so much stuff in this movie that works so well. Again, the music is amazing. God Help the Outcast is one of the most beautiful Disney songs ever written, in my opinion. And I'm not gonna lie, it ends up making me shed a tear usually when I hear it. I just I just love this movie, and I think there's just so much good going for it. Again, as I mentioned before, though, my only downside is the gargoyles. They just kind of, I know Disney wanted to throw them in as the comedic side characters that they always have, but they're just so kind of overused, in my opinion, and they get kind of annoying after a while. And this just kind of takes away from some of that darkness and drama, which I know is the point of them. But for me, who likes that kind of more mature storytelling of it, it does detract a little bit for me. But otherwise, it's still a great movie.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen Hunchback of Notre Dame, and it's not because I don't like the movie. To me, it's kind of coupled with Pocahontas for kind of being not necessarily too dark at times, but to me, these movies, in my opinion, just don't have a lot happening in them. And I'm kind of shocked they made it this high, but I kind of get it because it is a dark and moody film from memory. Like I remember, Quasimodo. I grew up watching the silent film with Lon Chaney playing him. Terrifying version of Quasimodo, mind you. Even the 60s and 70s remakes of the idea. I've seen countless stage performances of this musical in play over the years. But the Disney version, you know, I think they did a pretty stellar job at bringing the Notre Dame Cathedral to life and bringing a more dark tale to the films, because normally they're mostly like, you know at least some resemblance of family friendly, like, even the Lion King, as dark as it can be, has its upbeat moments, right? Hunchback doesn't really have a lot of that from memory. Now the gargoyles, I don't even remember their names, so I can tell you now, There's probably a reason why Micah doesn't like them, and I have nothing else to say there. They're not Greg Weisman's gargoyles from Disney. Which, if we're talking about Disney shows, Gargoyles would be my number one. Just saying. But yeah, I don't really have much to add to this. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I think I'll have to rewatch it.
Yeah, it's a great one. I recommend rewatching it again.
Okay.
All right, now we're into our top 2. So what is your number 2?
I love this movie. I don't care what people say. This is, if you took the Disney out of the equation and you just saw this movie on a plate, nobody would tell that this was a Disney movie, because it's a dark comedy with a lot of mature jokes and humor, and a lot of things that I think today's modern audience might be like, "Holy crap, they went there! I can't believe Disney made something like this." But this was a movie made by Judd Apatow, and no, we're not talking about George of the Jungle. We're talking about we're talking about a movie that I think is absolutely iconic and honestly one of the funniest comedies I think ever made. It's criminally overlooked. People need to give this a critical reevaluation. It's Heavyweights. Heavyweights, the movie about the fat camp kids. Look, I'm telling you, on the surface, it might sound mean spirited, and that's why I say this movie's a dark comedy. This movie's a mean, mean movie. Okay, it's literally about fat shaming kids to go to losing weight camp, and the band of kids in this movie are very 90s, and you're going to recognize a lot of them. Like, there's Keenan Thompson, you have Carp from Mighty Ducks playing the main kid. There are some other small time actors who are, more overweight that are, put in this movie because I guess they fit the weight demographic they're going for. There's some lesser than known adult characters going on here. Like Pat's played by a character that I literally only recognize in Disney television stuff from the 90s. The nurse character, I've never seen her in anything else. Fun fact though, Paul Feig, a famous director, you might recognize a lot of his movies if you hear the name. I think he worked on I think I don't think it was the Mean Girls remake, but he's done some work. I think he did the Ghostbusters remake. Paul Feig, hit or miss director. He's kind of controversial in terms of his movies. He plays one of the camp counselors in this film, and he's funny. He's hilarious. But the show stealer, in my opinion, is Tony Perkis, played by Ben Stiller. This, to me, is the prototype to what became White Goodman in the famous Ben Stiller comedy Dodgeball. I mean, Tony Perkis is a character you love to hate in this movie. He, of course, is just a guy stuck in his own bubble. He wants these kids to lose weight so he can use them as clout for info tapes to sell off to families and send their kids to fat camp. Essentially, he's taken over this mom and pop camp that kids that are overweight used to love to go to because they don't judge the kids there. Even though the parents are thinking that they're sending them to fat camp to lose weight, the counselors actually just want them to have fun more than anything else. But once Tony Perkis comes into the equation, they literally are put on lockdown like they're in prison. Like, he goes to their bunks and tries to take all their snacks they have, and these kids get to the point where they're so desperate they're hiding stuff in like their bed frames, they're hiding stuff in the floorboards. They have a secret stump out in the woods where they're hiding stuff in. They get in on it with the adults who don't like the change in the power structure because they didn't sign up to work with this guy, because he literally takes over the camp like the first night that they all arrive there. So they come up with this messed up scheme to get him taken out of the equation to take over the camp. And there's some funny lines in here. Like, the guy who plays Lars is one of the funniest movie characters in Disney history. He is hilarious. He plays the guy with the German accent. Oh my god, he is funny. I mean, and there's a like involving the dark humor. There's a whole bit in the film where there's a found footage element where they're recording like a documentary about what Tony Perkis has done to these kids at this camp. And there's one character, Josh, who's played by the same actor who played Goldberg in Mighty Ducks. He's they're out digging holes in the ground, and they have like Tony screaming at the kids, and then when he pans out a camera, they had like a fake rat in there, but he makes it look like it's real, and he takes a knife, cuts open the rat's guts, and starts eating it like because he's so hungry. I'm like, yo, Dizzy, chill out with these jokes, man. And there's also a lot of sexual humor in this movie from the kids. Like there's like a meet and greet to kind of humiliate the boys into losing weight that Tony Perkis sets up, where he has these like pretty girls from this girl camp come over to have a dance with him, but they don't want to dance with them because they're fat. That's supposed to be the joke. But the one guy who supposedly is the ugliest one is the only one that has game, and he ends up like getting with a girl. And that's the kind of humor you're expecting in this film. It's hilarious. It's hilarious to me. It's one of my favorite live action movies. It's one of my favorite comedy movies ever made. It's criminally underrated, and it needs a critical reevaluation. I've said this 3 times about live action Disney movies. This is my 3rd one. Give this movie another chance if you didn't like it back then, or maybe you haven't seen it and you probably would think that you hate it on paper. Actually watch the movie.
Yeah, it seems like a kind of comedy that I would like, just because I like mean-spirited humor. Dark jokes are my favorite kind of comedy. So,
I mean, the movie is mean. It's a mean movie. But it's funny. It's like one of the best executed dark comedies I've seen ever. And it's
yeah,
family
that's
friendly.
another one. I'm wondering if that's on Disney Plus as well.
I think it is, actually. I think it is.
All right. All right. So moving on to my top 2. Now, my number 2, to take into evaluation, it fluctuates depending on what we're evaluating here. On individual movies, it sticks here. But if we're talking like this, including spin-offs and stuff like that, it would be my number 1. But because we're just doing movies, my number 2 is Tangled. I love Tangled. It is easily one of those Disney movies that it's probably the best modern Disney movie in my opinion in terms of the animated movies. Just the way they reimagine Rapunzel's story is so well done, with this whole backstory of basically the witch that kidnaps Rapunzel is this haggard old woman who discovers this magical flower that basically, after you sing a song to it, it makes you young and pretty much just grants her eternal youth, basically, as long as she goes to revisit it. And eventually this flower is taken to save the life of the queen, who is pretty much dying. And because the queen was pregnant with Rapunzel at the time, when Rapunzel was born, she was kind of imbued with the powers of this flower, and her hair could basically have these same healing properties. And when Gothel ends up going in to basically cut a piece of her hair off to use as her way of staying young, she finds out that if you cut it, it loses its power and is pretty much unusable. So she resorts to kidnapping this baby right out from under the king and queen's nose, and basically running off to this abandoned tower and just locking Rapunzel up and making her live out 18 years of her life in this one solitary place, and never allowing her to cut her hair, and just gaslighting this girl from like beginning to end. Like, she's probably one of the most manipulative and realistic Disney villains of all time, because she is just so cruel to her under the guise of being a loving mother. And it's just one of those villains that just really kind of, again, hits you in that kind of way, because she's someone who could exist in real life. And I think that's just what makes her such a great villain. And Donna Murphy, her performance as Gothel is just very fun. She has this kind of mix of very charming fun with the character, but then bringing in a lot of those darker, more sinister moments with her. All of the songs in this movie are fantastic. I See the Light is probably my favorite Disney love song duet of all time. And of course, then the highlight of this movie, in my opinion, Flynn Rider. He is my favorite male Disney character of all time. He is easily one of the funniest characters, just how the suaveness of him, and just him basically coming into this Rapunzel's tower after he double-crossed these two thieves he worked with named Stabbington Brothers, after he pretty much stole the crown right out from under the guards' noses in this really great scene where this man has so much confidence. He steals this crown and literally just talks to the guard and basically just lets him know he's there. And just after he runs into the tower, and there's just obviously it has hijinks with Rapunzel, where he basically makes this deal with her. He takes her to see these floating lanterns that Rapunzel has always seen from her window of her tower. always appear on her birthday. And basically, if he does that, he will take her there and then return her safely to the castle or the tower. And then she will give him back the satchel with the crown that he stole. And basically, it kicks off this whole story of them going on this adventure, meeting a bunch of crazy, goofy characters in the Snuggly Duckling, which is like, again, one of the fun sequence. All the thug characters are very fun and just very well integrated into the story, especially in the climax. They have a very fun way of, incorporating them when they're saving Flynn Rider from prison. There's just a lot of great action in the movie involving, a lot of like Rapunzel using Rapunzel's hair as like ropes and like chasing from guards and the thieving twins and all these things. It's just overall a very fun, energetic, and funny movie. A lot of that comedy coming from Flynn Rider and just Zachary Levi's portrayal of him is just so well done and hilarious. And it took me a long time. I never realized Zachary Levi played him until recently. So that was a very fun thing. It's probably my favorite Zachary Levi performance, actually. And I just think that everything in this movie works so well together. And like I would say, like the only reason I have it at number 2 is like, again, I'm not a big fan of 3D animation, so that holds it back a little bit for me. But if we are talking about, if it would include spin-off series, it would be number 1 because the Tangled animated series that Disney Channel made back in like 2017, probably my favorite animated Disney show of all time. It just has a great story. It really feels like it's just a straight continuation from the end of the movie. It has phenomenal music. Honestly, some of my favorite Disney music ever written. It's written back by Alan Menken, who wrote the music for the movie. It brought back all of the original voice actors, even including for a couple of the brief scenes she's in flashbacks and dream sequences. They got Donna Murphy back to play Gothel. Zachary Levi and Mandy Moore come back. And even all the voice actors for the thugs and all of them come back. And then, of course, the series also brings in some great new characters who hired Broadway legends to play some of these newer characters, which really brings a lot in terms of the music into the show. And even some voice acting legends come in because Rapunzel's dad, King Frederick, is voiced by Clancy Brown. And another great performance is King Edmund, who is the king of like another kingdom out there. But I don't want to get into too much because his tie to the characters is kind of spoilery later on. But he's voiced by Bruce Campbell. So that's a really fun kind of, bringing some of those actors into there. And just, you can tell everyone just had so much love and passion put into this show. And it just, everything blends together so well. And just that tied with Tangled is like the perfect package, in my opinion. But just as a standalone movie, there is one movie I like a little bit more. So.
I lament I've never seen Tangled or the show. I can't comment on it, but I know my niece is really into that, and I might watch it with her to check it out. I'll take your word on it that it's amazing. I just can't speak on it. But I have seen, like, in terms of like recent animated movies, the only one I've seen is Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and that's a DreamWorks movie. So, and that movie was incredible. So if that holds up to that, then we're cooking here.
For sure. All right. So what is your number 1?
So my number 1's actually kind of like a forgotten movie. It's more specifically the first movie. This is part of a franchise. I think this franchise is a solid franchise. I don't think there's a bad movie in the bunch. I think the third movie in this franchise, which was a straight-to-video film, gets a lot of unfair hate. And I'm saying it right now. Stop hating on this movie. Give it a critical reevaluation. Okay, that's the 4th time. But this first movie here is without a doubt my favorite thing from Disney ever. And it's not even that, like, when you think about it, it's not that special of a movie, right? But this is one of those things when if you know the backstory of how this movie happened and the people involved, me being a massive horror fan, okay, let me just read you off the people involved with this movie before I tell you who it is. Stuart Gordon, Brian Usna, Ed Naha, Joe Johnston. I mean, these guys are like synonymous with horror. You know that Rick Moranis is in this movie. Rick Moranis was a staple in the 80s. He was in Little Shop of Horrors. He was in Spaceballs. He was in the Ghostbusters movies. He had a fledgling comedy career, but I think this was probably one of the only times he was ever given a starring role. and they didn't even want to give him this role, but he managed to make an iconic character that I think, as time went on, got better after this movie. My favorite iteration of this character is actually in the TV show version, based on the based canonically between the events of the first film and the second film of the franchise. But nonetheless, my favorite Disney movie ever made, and I miss it deeply in the parks, is Honey I Shrunk the Kids. Look, Honey I Shrunk the Kids is a technical feat. I mean, there's movies in the 50s and 60s that were doing kind of what this film was doing, trying to, you know, insinuate that, the characters are much smaller than what they actually are on screen. But this movie was a technical marvel of its time. I mean, there was movies in the 80s like The Cat's Eye, for example, that had a segment about a little troll, and they literally made the world's largest bed, which I kid you not, literally took up the entire height of a studio warehouse out in like Wilmington, North Carolina. So that should tell you how big that thing was. But this movie, they had to build basically animatronics from scratch, outside set pieces from scratch. They had to do claymation molds from scratch, visual effects. I mean, everything from this movie was grassroots. There's basically no CGI in this movie whatsoever, which is really impressive given that in the time that this movie came out, CGI was starting to actually become a thing. So they avoided it. They made this movie completely old school. It has some old school techniques in there, like the whole flying bee sequence. If you've seen this movie and you know about the flying bee sequence, that can be kind of choppy. But for its time, I guarantee you this blew kids' minds when they first saw this movie. Because this movie is pure escapism to its core. And this shows you the chances that Walt Disney was willing to take back in the day that I just don't feel like they are willing to take now. I know they wanted to bring back Honey I Shrunk the Kids recently with Shrunk with Josh Gad playing Nick Zelinsky, and I was on board with that. I was like, please give me more of this franchise. But it got put on hiatus, and I don't think it's going to happen, sadly. But this movie, back to what I was saying, Disney was unsure if they were going to go with this, but Michael Eisner, I think the guy who was running Disney, he saw the potential of the film and said, "Look, we could release it under Touchstone, but if we put it under Walt Disney, more tickets are going to sell and kids are going to eat this up." This movie became an instant smash hit. It went to home video, sold a lot of tapes. It garnered a sequel, got a straight to video sequel, had a spin off show. I mean, you can't think about Disney in the 90s and not think about Honey I Shrunk the Kids in some capacity. And if you like Disney parks, it was at MGM Studios for years as an attraction, and there was a whole outdoor event to kind of put you in the movie and what it would have looked like. I can tell you, it basically imbued what this film was going for, and all this movie really is about a down on his luck inventor taking a chance on his dreams while his wife is slaving away, doing the hard work, being a lawyer, whatever she does, and that's putting a strain on their marriage, and they're having marital problems, and how the parents have to come together because of the husband's dreams actually coming true. He invents a shrinking ray that he's been working hard on diligently, but the problem is it accidentally starts working due to an accident from the neighbor kids next door knocking a baseball into the attic, and it causes the kids to have to go up there and check on the machine and the damage, and they accidentally get shrunk and swept up by the dad, who comes home angrily and destroys the machine thinking it doesn't work, and throws the kids out in the garbage out into the big nature beyond that is the backyard. And I'm telling you, you could have fooled me that these giant blades of grass weren't fabricated from real grass. I mean, it looks believable. It looks like they literally had maybe 40 art, design and set designers on hand at all times, manicuring this backdrop in the set pieces of this film. They look exquisite. They built a giant Lego piece that I heard apparently took like 4 months to build, and they had to get the rights to do it. I mean, there's a giant cigarette that they had to replicate because the neighbor dad smoked. Apparently, that took a long time to do. I mean, this movie took a lot of sweat equity to make, and you just don't see movies made like this. As far as live action Disney goes, I'm here to kind of represent this side of the discussion more than Micah. This has to be like I think the best made live action movie in terms of like blood, sweat, and tears, heart, and actual creativity. Because all the people behind this movie, they took a chance on an original idea, and this is something unheard of for Disney back then, um, to this capacity. But look what it caused. Look what it spawned. I think this movie has a great legacy, and it's a cult classic for a reason. I love this film to death, and I wish it would come back. Hell, I'd even take a remake at this point. So, see what they can do nowadays with it. But yeah, that's my number one favorite Disney movie ever made. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah, that's a solid movie. I remember watching that one a few times as a kid. And I remember actually when I went to Disney, like my first time ever going in, like I think first or second grade, I actually did the Honey and Shrunk the Kids play place area. So I remember that very fondly and messing around in there. But I actually mainly grew up with the sequel, Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves. That's the one I mainly watched growing up. And that's the one I kind of just gravitated to. I felt like it was almost a more fun scenario where like the parents are shrunk down and these kids are just pretty much have free reign to do whatever they want in the house, pretty much thinking the parents are gone. And it's like that whole adventure. Then the parents have to go on to try and get back to normal and kind of, I guess, reclaim the house and everything like that. And it's just a very fun movie, I think. And there's a lot of fun, again, a lot of fun little practical things they do, like the whole scene where they fall into the bowl of chip dip and stuff. And like,
Yeah,
I don't know why that scene sticks out to me the most of all the scenes, but I just remember that one vividly from when I was watching it as a kid.
yeah. In these movies, I think mine is like Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, which is literally just a rip on Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, but with a giant baby. But it's set in Las Vegas I guess like a kaiju movie. Um, I think the heart of my fandom comes from the first and third movies and the TV show. Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. I want to say is objectively a good movie in the franchise. I know a lot of people dunk on Shrunk Ourselves, and I think that's complete BS. I think that movie's actually good. Um, Blew Up the Kid is probably like decent realistically, but I think it's good because it has characters that are recognizable and it does fit canonically and helps guide going from the timeline of the first movie to the TV show all the way to Shrunk Ourselves, which is completely way down the timeline for this franchise. But um I think the first movie and the third movie kind of hold the magic the most. And Dean Cundy, bless his soul, made that straight to video movie. And they were originally promised like a $40 million budget. And then the Disney execs were like, hey, we're going to make movies straight to video. And I think they cut it from that down to like less than 7 million. So they had to work with what they could. And I think they still made a really good movie out of what they had. They turned
Mhm.
lemons into lemonade there. But
Yeah, for sure. All right. Now we get to my number one, the final entry on all of our lists. And my number one is pretty much been my favorite Disney movie since the beginning. Like I didn't watch it much growing up, and I kind of like for most of my childhood, like through I think like freshman year of high school, I kind of just like evaded Disney because my mindset as a kid was like, oh, Disney's for girls. That was literally my mindset growing up because the big princess focus and all that. But then freshman year of high school, I started getting back into it when I was listening to some of the music from Disney, and that's really what kind of hooked me into it. And this is the movie that pretty much hooked me from the start. It was my favorite Disney movie ever since, and that is Aladdin. I think Aladdin is easily just one of the most classic animated Disney movies. In my opinion, it's the best Renaissance movie and just the best movie from the studio. I think it's one of those Disney movies that I've mentioned this because I did a review on Aladdin, but it's like one of those Disney movies that feels like it was geared more towards a boy audience than a girl audience, like most of the princess movies were. Because you have a male lead who is this street rat named Aladdin, who basically just kind of on his own thieving and just pretty much having to evade guards and stuff. And basically the whole thing is his journey of, meeting this girl named Jasmine, who is this very, beautiful princess that he falls in love with pretty much at first sight, and has this whole basically journey where he's forced to basically help this guy named Jafar, who is the main villain of the movie, go into this cave of wonders because he is this diamond in the rough to basically go in and find this magic lamp that Jafar wants. And eventually he gets double crossed by Jafar and gets trapped in the cave. And thanks to Abu, his monkey, stealing the lamp back from Jafar, we end up meeting the genie, who is probably the best comedic Disney side character of all time, voiced amazingly by Robin Williams. Like, Robin Williams is just, the man could do no wrong. And just the way he performed the genie is one of his best performances. You can just see how much passion and love he had for this role, and just how much energy, and just he just brings it so well into this with all the impressions he does, and just all the really quick comedy gags that you see throughout the movie. And really, it's just a message as well about Aladdin having to learn to be himself and stop living this lie as he pretends to be a prince so he can get closer to Jasmine and possibly be able to eligible to marry her, because there's a whole law that Jasmine has to marry a prince. And so he has to pretty much go on this whole journey of having to learn to stop living in a lie and learn to basically be himself. And I think that's just a great message for a lot of people to hear, especially when you're a kid. You tend as a kid to gravitate towards acting like a certain group to be popular or be liked. And it's even if it's disingenuous to yourself. And I feel like this movie is just kind of one of those great messages that kids need to learn, that it's okay to be yourself. You may not necessarily have everything you want in life, but being yourself overall is still better than living in a lie that you can't really escape from. And obviously, at the end, Aladdin being himself is what wins, and he ends up, that's how he ends up falling for Jasmine falls for him. And it's just one of those great movies, I think, where again, it's great messages for kids. Has a lot of really fun action. One of my favorite climaxes in any Disney movie with Sorcerer Jafar having all this big battle with Aladdin is so great, and all the spells and magic and transformations that go on during that. It's just a movie that I love dearly, always have and always will. And I even like the live action remake. I think that's another one of the better live action remakes. So yeah, that's my number one.
Anytime I think about Aladdin, I think about the epic opening the movie has when they venture down into the area where the genie lamp is found. That is one of the coolest things I think Disney has ever put to screen in terms of animation. Like that
Mhm.
whole what is actually just like a cave in the earth in the actual like Aladdin legend. Like, if you've ever seen like any Aladdin live action outside of the Disney one, they don't have the Cave of Wonder, whatever it's called. They don't have that level of intricacy going on. It's literally just like a hole in the earth that they fall into, and it's kind of similar there. But the animation in this movie is killer. Like you said, I think Aladdin being a male-centered character, for a princess movie, makes it more appealing to the male audience. And for that, I think it offers probably the biggest shakeup to that formula, maybe next to Beauty and the Beast. Even though I like Beauty and the Beast more than Aladdin a little bit. And especially when we're talking about live actions, I think Beauty and the Beast, I think, is a better live action movie than Aladdin, but I didn't hate it. It was kind of weird at times with how they went with certain directions, but I would say it's a bit rich, but okay. In the words of Rosen. Um, but Aladdin, I think it's a fun movie. There was actually a spin-off PC game that I was really into as a kid that I used to, play a lot, and I was really into learning about the mythos of Aladdin in the game. And I watched the straight-to-video movies as well, like The Return of Jafar, and I think there was a third one, maybe even a fourth one. I can't remember. It might have been a TV show as well. I was all in on that. The '90s was a special time for animated Disney. I'm telling y'all, there was not a shortage of content whatsoever for these properties. I think Return of the Jafar was the first straight to video animated movie that they did, which I'm shocked they went that route with that. You would think that they would go straight to the theaters with it, but who knows
Yeah.
why they didn't do it? Because Aladdin was a successful movie.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said in my ranking as well, like this would probably be number two if it was talking about like the franchise as a whole, because the direct video sequels and the TV show are are pretty weak in my opinion. just the sheer drop in animation quality between the movie and Return of Jafar is just baffling. I mean, obviously the direct video sequels were lower budget, but like the animation looks awful in those movies, especially compared to like some of the ones like The Lion King 2, which actually has a pretty good animation, pretty on par with the original. Like the Aladdin one just feels like such a downgrade. And I think that, especially in terms of the TV series, Tangled would beat that out for me. But in terms of individual movies, Aladdin beats it out.
You know, I can't complain with Aladdin being number one. It's a solid movie.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So there it is. That is our top 10 Disney movies. This is a really fun collab. Thank you all so much for joining as usual. It's always fun getting to do these kind of videos with you and just talk about more stuff than just Goosebumps, because we always just do Goosebumps related collabs. So it was fun to kind of venture off and do something a little bit different.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it brings back a lot of memories watching these movies as kids. So I appreciated you allowing me to do that.
Yeah, for
Get to live
sure.
in my man-child brain for a little bit.
So yeah, I just gotta thank you guys all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this collab. We'll definitely be doing more collabs in the future, both on this channel and on the Goosebumps channel. And just again, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, just leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and of course, we want to hear your thoughts too. So leave your top 10 Disney movies in the comments down below. I'd love to see what you guys would think about your movies. I'm sure Completionist would also love to see it. So yeah, that's all I really got for you. So we'll see you all in the next video. Bye.
Take care.